problem with addiction comes in when unnatural, foreign things hijack our brain's normal dopamine releasing process. With addiction to the wrong thing, there's so much dopamine that is released that the brain's receptors are not able to function in the right way, which creates an imbalance. And what happens is the brain's chemistry is thrown off because there's an overproduction of dopamine. And when one is addicted to things that overproduce dopamine, things such as porn, alcohol, certain foods, drugs, overindulgence in video games, when you have an overproduction of dopamine, it does two harmful things. It creates a chemical imbalance that reduces your ability to enjoy natural pleasures. Number two, it robs you from feeling truly satisfied. You see, when someone is addicted to something that overproduces dopamine, they will never be satisfied. They will always have an urge to find more and more forms of satisfaction to recreate that feeling. The natural things that are supposed to leave them satisfied through normal dopamine release, well, they just won't satisfy. So the person who is addicted to harmful things will have to keep trying to replicate that high, which ultimately leaves them feeling empty, depressed. The battle of novelty is this. It's when you have been doing something that gives you a high, but eventually it gets so boring that you have to do more extreme forms of it to get that good feeling. And then you have to keep increasing and increasing that activity until it produces death in you. This is what James was alluding to when he said this. In the first chapter 14, he said, "But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. Then, after the desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And then sin, when it is fully grown, gives birth to death." See, James spoke about how you first have desire, and then in acting on it, it leads to sin. And then sin develops, it grows, which eventually leads to death. Really what he's describing is the battle of novelty. For example, at first, a pornography addict, they're fine just looking at a picture in a magazine, but eventually, a picture in a magazine, that just won't cut it. They then find the need to find more and more hardcore images. And then those images lead to them needing to listen to and watch videos to bring about that euphoric feeling. Eventually, even the videos develop to become more disturbing so that they can get that high. This is how many people get into various forms of devious and sadistic forms of pornography. And all just to give them that novel feeling. And eventually, sitting behind a computer won't cut it. And many men and women can tell you that the only way they were able to satisfy themselves at that point was to go out, visit strip clubs, and meet with prostitutes, which can easily lead to death. Death from disease, violence, death, just as James was talking about. You see, when sin is fully conceived, it leads to death. And that's what happens when you indulge in things that overproduce dopamine. You're never satisfied, and you find yourself having to do more of it and more of it and more of it to get that high and more of it to get that high until you find yourself depleted and on the road to death. In the meantime, while you're chasing that high, the things that should naturally bring you pleasure don't. And that's why you would find yourself depressed